So again, I thank you all for being here. I'm going to start by having the panel introduce themselves. Just less than a minute. Who you are, what you do, whatever you want to say. And we'll start with Natasha.
I'm Natasha Daniels Muhammad. I moved to Rwanda on May 27th of this year for work. For my job, I'm a senior IT product manager, but that's not the sum total of who I am. But I'll keep it low.
Adila Muhammad, we've been here over a year and a half. The other owner of Ikala Cafe. I'm a wife, mother, sister, friend, auntie. We'll stop with that one.
Do I do it again?
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Justin, Rwandan entrepreneur. Yeah, happy to be here.
I'm Anna Marie, and I have been living in Rwanda for about 4.5 years, and I am happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invite, and I'm happy to be here with the rest of the panelists and in community with everybody. I am originally from Chicago area, and been here 4.5 years, and I am the founder and managing director of a communications agency called Kigali Forward. And we're committed to shifting and expanding and amplifying the narrative of Rwanda.
Bose Aline Joyce, I go by Bose. I am a feminist activist in Rwanda, and I also run a femtech startup that helps women find safe and trusted service providers. And our first product is in health, but also in transportation.
And again, I'm Deborah Greenwood. I've lived in Rwanda now for 13 months. And when I first came here, I did a lot of crying. And I guess I'm still crying because it's still, it's very emotional to be out of what I would call the lion's den, which is where I felt I was living in the United States, with all the increased tax on people, all the divisions that were being created by the previous president. And America just didn't, it felt even less safe than it had felt for many, many years. So I'm glad to be away from that, but having been an activist since the age of 15, which was 55 years ago, it's not something you just give up. So I still got to do something. So I'm here trying to do whatever I can to help push the conversation, push the unity forward, so that we can create a better world by working together. I guess that would be the best way I can describe myself. What we hope comes out of this is a real working relationship between Rwandese and Black diasporans. So we're just going to see, we want to talk about what we can come up with, projects that we can do, whether they be in education, agriculture, business, whatever, that we can do together to help make things better for us all. That's kind of the direction that we're going in. So the first question is, what is something we could do together to foster greater understanding and cooperation?
That's a really hard question because, I'm not sure if we're talking about business, starting something together, or whether we're thinking about like how to support each other in whatever things we're doing. So I think I would start with like supporting each other, not necessarily like doing business together, because that's coming from a business, world. I know it's really hard, to think about things right now. But what I see something that we could do together would be kind of create a platform where people, I think I want to call it maybe intercultural dialogues, where people come and share experiences, and like we come and share, challenges we face, and get some inputs from other people, maybe who have done this before, and if there are other cultural things, then we would share. And I would suggest that be off camera, where we really talk about real issues that we have in businesses, whether you're struggling African diaspora, if you're struggling to manage your staff, or you're struggling to with other business relations, then you feel comfortable sharing, and you're sharing with people who care, and who can support you, give you whatever information you need to do your business better. So I think that could be something beneficial, to create a platform that meets once at a time, and then you talk about serious issues, not necessarily culture, but also business and skills.
Okay. So what is the one thing, and I'm going to ask Adila this, that you wish the Rwandese knew about your culture or your values? When I say you're Black American.
And that's exactly what I wanted to answer. When we're talking about how can we get a greater understanding and cooperating with each other. When you get off the plane to come to Rwanda, the first thing or the first place people tell you to go to the genocide, go learn about what happened here, the true history of what Rwanda is. And in that, and beginning to talk to the community and talk to the natives here, they don't know our history. A lot of them just think that we were just Black people in America, in a different part of the world, but they don't understand how we got there. And a lot of what they understand is through videos, rap videos or sports. So they don't get the true picture of who we are, where we come from, what we're going through, why we're here, because it's not something that they're taught. And I think if the country wants to move forward and invite people back, expats back, in particular Black people from all over the globe, to come to Rwanda, then maybe we should introduce the true history of the Black Americans, or I don't want to just say Americans because we're all in Europe, we're in all over the place, but how did we get there? Who are we? And then they begin to see why we are the way that we are, why we carry ourselves a certain way, why we're very security-minded, why we have a hard time trusting, and why we don't deal with certain things and certain people in certain ways. They don't understand because they never even heard it. Even here at Ikawa, when we first talked with our team, a lot of them never knew, how did we get to America? How did we get there? And at a point where we can't even really share the true history because it breaks their heart. And to understand that we connect with Rwanda. One of the reasons why Black Americans do come here, because we have that part in common, the traumatic experience. We're able to connect on that same level, but also understand that what happened to you for that period is still going on for us 400 plus years later. So I think if we get to learn about each other's culture, not just come and learn about this culture because this is where you are, but you want us to come, you want us to unite, you want us to bring our dollars, you want us to help build, then it needs to be a dual education. Who are these people that you're inviting over? Where did they come from? And how can we heal each other?
I think healing is very important. That was such a beautiful segue. Just one second. Kabibi or Marlon, you want to talk just for 30 seconds. Remember I asked you to have something prepared about our plans for the African history courses? Because Adila just set you up beautifully.
We have a concept where we want to share informative videos that we've screened already related to a lot of little known things as well, not just like the popular histories that we know from civil rights, things like this, or genocide, but even deeper into it, what was like the royal kingship like in Rwanda before the Belgians came, for instance, like what is that history? Like we don't really hear about that because it's overshadowed by certain things. We want to be able to bring that to life from the Rwandan side, and then from the expat side, history before just slavery. It didn't just start there. There's lots more before that. So there are some credible YouTubers that we're screening, Kibibi and I, and that we'll be sharing in the new year. So really looking forward to sharing and growing and learning with all of you guys for that.
How do y'all feel about that, learning history together? One of the things that I've been very adamant about is that we need to learn classical ancient African history. And that's because that's what we have in common, right? We're so used and we've been so divided by European imperialism and colonialism. We've been taught to hate each other because of the way we look, because of who we love, because of the so-called tribe we come from. We've been taught all those things, and so our common history gets lost. So I think it's very important that we start there with the fact that we come from a common history, okay? And then our histories diverged. And now, with any luck, we'll have a common bright future. That's what I'd like to see. That's what this old lady would like to see. Anybody else want to comment on that before I go on?
Yeah, I think so there's that part, but also looking at, there's the shared history of colonization, but also acknowledging how it looks different. Because, and acknowledging, like, though there's things going on in the U.S., it's not the same as what happened here. And I think that's important. I know you didn't mean it in that way, but because, like, when you think about the atrocity of what happened here, and also, like, very different in one people, right? And different to, like, our proximity in the States to white supremacy, and that being our oppression, and that being what it is that has been the boot on our neck, right, as people would say back in the day, or versus your own people, your own neighbor, and that having been inspired by, or implanted rather, by and sparked by colonization. And so just also being careful of, like, they show up in very different ways and that it's not the same thing. But even in that, knowing that even if they look different here and there, what is that common denominator? And those stories, and knowing that my pain might be different, your pain might be different. I might think you have, because you do have more than me, but it doesn't mean that you haven't been through something, and it doesn't come from the same root. But also acknowledging while there are those, while there are some similarities in terms of where it sprang from, also recognizing the weight of both of them that they carry, but knowing that they're very different.
And piggybacking off of what Autumn was saying, it's also the freshness, right? So there's, while things that are being perpetuated now that came through because of the transatlantic slave trade that is happening in America and Europe and in the Caribbean, we are generations removed from the actual act of slavery. And so there's a difference in the freshness of the stemming traumatic events, right? So I can say that I brought over the plate that my grandmother's grandmother made when she was a slave. Now, that doesn't mean that what's going on now doesn't stem from that and stem from that mindset. However, I can't say my mother was killed during the genocide. And to also honor that. honor the freshness. We don't have to come together on common traumas. Like, we don't have to trauma bond all the time, right? That's what we're used for, coming from a place where we come from trauma bond and like, man, I went through this, me too, right? We can come from a place like, I was just divorced. You know what? I was divorced too, and then we all get caught up in that point. You can talk about, hey, you know what? This hairstyle, I saw this beautiful hairstyle because I looked at it today on how the traditional Rwandan hair and how it was about the pathways for the kings. And so the height of the hair represented the mountains. And then the parts represented the pathways. And then where there's the empty patch here, it's where you come together, where the different kings would come together after battle. That is a beautiful story. That is so ingenious. We can talk about how through anything we come through in our ingenuity, how we've been able to create. We can come through that. We can talk about our future. We don't necessarily just have to trauma bond. While it can be a portion of it to say, hey, we've had these things happen, but it doesn't have to be the root of how we can come together.
At home, I don't know anywhere else, but in the U.S., there's people that are, let's say, recovering addicts. They get together in a group. They all have a different addiction maybe. This one did this one did that. But they come together and they talk through the trauma. They talk through the pain and they talk together. And even though one might have been rich and had a beautiful, lush life and had traumatic events happen to them, and this one might have been extremely poor, the fact that they both had went through something very similar, they come together and they talk and they work through it and they can heal. It's a healing process. You can't sweep it. You can't, even though you want to stay on that high octave, you have to address the pain. You can't just put a Band-Aid on the pain and say, get over it, let's focus on whatever else. You have to deal with the pain. When we're coming over here, most of the time we're leaving something. We're refugees. We're leaving pain. We're leaving fear. We're leaving poverty. We're leaving mistreatment. This ain't yesterday. So when we're talking about the trauma of what's going on from where a lot of us come from, it's still happening. And it came from something. It's not brand new. This is not new stuff. And even if it's my neighbor got shot from my other neighbor, there's a history on how did this happen? Where did it come from? Where did the guns come from? Where did this mindset come from? There's a lot of history that's there that is also what happened here in Rwanda. So when you're talking and you're healing each other, you're dealing with the root cause of the problem. You got to deal with the root cause of the problem. You got to know, well, who are these people? For my Rwandese friends here, they have to know, well, who is Jada? Who is Adila? Where does she come from? Why is she here? I didn't just wake up and say I want to come to Rwanda. I didn't. And I never, ever thought about leaving Atlanta. Well, why did I leave? What traumatic events happened that I uprooted everything I knew, gave up everything I knew, and I had a great life? Why did I have to come here? Why did I leave? It's important for you to know who you're dealing with. Not just when I'm feeling good, but what causes me to feel bad? What are those traumas? And how can we connect? How can we heal each other? This is a land of healing, obviously. Our people that's coming, they need a healing. They're looking for a sacred place. They're looking for refuge. If you want to get to actually unify that, you got to know who we are. We have to know who you are before we come out here. But you also need to know who are we.
And you know, one of the other things is we've left family, friends, people we care about and love who are still back there. And we worry about them. We worry about them because we don't know when a police officer is going to pull over like one of my nephews, blow his head off. I don't know when or if that could happen, but I know it could happen because of where he lives. So we carry that worry. I know I carry that worry with me all the time. Even though I'm happy, it's almost like survivor's guilt. You know, it's like, wow, I made it, but ooh, there's so many who are still there dealing with
No, I think most of the things that was said are I tend to believe is quite enough, but I think the way I find it is that, like, when we talk about Rwanda, there's a lot of references that are made to Rwandans and the history where we come from, and a lot of people, obviously, even the PR of the country and how it's advertised around genocide. But I like what was mentioned, that there's a history of Rwandans way before that, but there's also history of East African, of Bantu, of African people on this land in itself as people who stayed here. I think one of the interesting thing about, I guess, how these different events, right, or history periods, right, affect us very differently in a different circumstances, right? I think there's a connection that connects me to Rwandans just specifically because we're coming from, and not all Rwandans, right? So depending on where I'm coming from and how I relate to Rwandans, and that shared value of, like, we know where we're coming from and what makes us really Rwandan that any other nationality can never really feel. And I think it's important to really value that identity itself, because I think even when, for me, as I mentioned in the last series, I've lived in the US, but I was able to observe, that shared identity of what African Americans are. And for me to introduce myself to now an identity for me as an African being in this space, how am I translating this information, and how is it changing me and shaping me as a person? So I don't think there's a reason. I actually don't see, there might be a connection somewhere, but these experiences affect people in different ways. And these identities make a person who they are completely differently. Like she mentioned, I don't think the history of African Americans on the continent of America and Rwandans is completely different. They actually don't even have, because the oppression system is different, and the history itself is completely different. Even the structure of colonialism on the continent here of Africa, the white superiority and power dynamics between Africans and Europeans and our colonists are very different from how white people treat black people in America. So all those things are not different. I don't think it's in one basket, but they do have how they relate to who we are now. I think creating a space of understanding and cooperation between two people, it just needs us to create a space where we can learn from each other, we can relate from each other. And I like what she mentioned about even relating to each other away from our traumas. Mm-hmm. I think I like Rwandan community and how we have decided to move on. There's a time when I was going through primary, and like this history of where we're coming from, the experiences are just right there in the face, and it was scary at times, and you wonder, like, is there gonna be another, I don't know, community where, I don't know, you just laugh, or your parents are not worried about where you are, who you were with, who your teacher is, what kind of doctor is seeing, like this wave of dark cloud on the people. I think it's important for when we're building this cooperation to just first connect as humans, as people who are really interested, because before we even talk about black experts and Rwandans, I think it's because we're living in the same community together. Now we are here in this community together, so creating a space of understanding from both sides is very important. I thought it was very important that I think the conversation doesn't always have to focus on finding the connection within that trauma, because personally I think they're very different. Right. And even for me as a person now, when I came back here, there's a way I couldn't share, like, there's such a thing as a black identity, because they don't know, like, we don't have the same race analysis on the continent here as the same race analysis in
With the exception of South Africa, yeah.
yeah.
Because of their proximity to white supremacy, yeah.
Exactly. So it's completely different, and those conversation needs to be addressed differently.
Yeah, I do.
I just want to give an example of why what I'm saying to me is important. We had, when we first came, we had a lady, we called her the auntie. And she picked the girls up. We have at that time, two 10-year-olds from tennis. And they were supposed to be back, bring them to the house. And I say maybe an hour went by and they didn't get there. Hour and a half went by and they didn't get there. So now we're panicking. We're fresh off the plane, about 2-3 months off the plane. As a Black American, we came here because people stole children in the States. They were stealing them, killing them, raping them, taking body parts. All of this is playing in our minds. Where's our girls? I'm calling people, no one's answering. So finally, I'm able to reach the person, and she's like, oh, we're just at the house. The girls wanted to come over and see my house. I lost it. What do you mean? It's been 2 hours. You let and call. I'm going off. The driver's getting it. She's getting it. Someone else is getting it. I am going off. And when they come home, when she brings them to the house, and they're all like, what happened? The culture here is very family oriented. They don't have those worries and fears that we have in the States. So they're like, they just came to my house. You know me. I love them. And no. In my mind, someone stole my girls. No one called. No one asked permission. Someone stole my girls. I'm going off. I'm in panic mode. We're praying. I'm almost near tears because I'm not reaching no one on the phone. They're trying to figure out, why is she crazy? I'm trying to figure out, why are you crazy? How you just take somebody's children and don't bring them home? It's a cross culture right there. Here, we see little boys run up, especially to my husband, and jump and try to pull them away. And they just, it's family. They love it. And you can trust it. It's safe. That's not the land that I come from. So when you take in my girls, now I'm triggered. You just triggered me. But you don't know it because you don't know what we go through. You don't know our history. You don't know anything about me except for I'm Black and I lived in the U.S. So these are the things I'm talking about. I'm not saying connect on, okay, we went through slavery, you went through genocide. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you connect on, even through those two things, there's a common denominator. There's a common denominator that started both. Even through those two things, there's trauma. It's trauma. And we have to heal it. If we're coming over here, you have to know, okay, let me not take her child. Why? you can, she can go. Talk to me first.
So I want to pause for a minute because I want to acknowledge what you're saying, because I think it goes to, like, before we even get into cross-culturally relating, we need to get into interpersonally relating. Because everything doesn't always just go with the culture, the land, the nation, the community we're coming from. We are all also our individual people that are emerging. And like you said, we're carrying those identities. And a big part of this is, how do we just relate as people? Because goodness knows, all the Black folks here from the States are not on the same page. That is the reality of the matter, because you're never going to go anywhere with all of the people from anywhere all on the same page. We are a representation of the whole eclectic being of people from the States. And as we talk and hopefully build community more amongst ourselves, we will find more common ground, as is true if you bring any random sampling of people from anywhere, right? And so in that, and it's just, part of it is the humility and the learning to hear what is being said. And so much of what is in this, what I have experienced rather, in this culture in Rwanda, is what is being said and what is not being said. What is being said, right? In those moments of silence and when not being said, and you kept saying trauma, right? And it was because you're feeling that. There's something that happened. And so us pausing, one, to acknowledge that in that moment, and the moments that many people may have gone through in that adjusting. So I wanted to like just pause and acknowledge that, because that's so real, especially as a mom, and to have to go through that, and just to actually give a moment for that, because that's real. And the things that we come up and that we want to relate to, it is our personal experience. And for somebody to move here and go through that, right, that's jarring, like you said, it's triggering. And there's a piece of relating in it, and ultimately there's all the things that we've gone through on our own. Because when I heard that story, and when you said there's the two common things, I heard family. You said trauma, but I heard family. Because what I heard was, you're like, these are my babies. This is my family. And I'm passionate about that. And I need to know where my babies are, because this is my family. Mm-hmm. And then what I heard you describe about Rwanda is that family is communal. And so they saw this as family. So where you heard trauma, I heard family as a connector, right? Because I heard your family and how you're moving in that, and knowing how you have to protect your family in the States, and then being here and also learning to, loosen, and how do you do that, and how do you shift to relate here, and people also then at some point learning, okay, this might take a little bit because society was not the same where she came from, But I think the biggest thing is for us to realize those things. What are our things that we're each carrying? And also to acknowledge everybody didn't move here out of trauma and running from the States. I think that's important, because it doesn't mean that even if someone didn't move here of running from the States, or wanting to, I don't want to say running, but like leaving something behind or making a conscious choice for that reason, it doesn't mean they're not aware of what happened there. But some people came here out of joy. And simply out of joy, right? And others did come here because there was a lot that was happening in the last couple of years that for some reason, for a lot of people, has caused the black sit, or was that last thing that they needed to say, okay, I'm out. But many to also acknowledge, many people have come here for different reasons, or this is where the journey has led for the time being. And to recognize, as hard as it is in that humility, when we say we want people to know about us, and I'm not saying this against anything anyone has said, I completely understand that. I'll be very honest, I have cried at being called Mzungu when I first got in here. I have gone through all of those emotions, right, where everything is stripped and you're simply seen as a quote-unquote American. And as somebody who politically was raised to be an African in the U.S., not an African American, not a Black American, not an American, politically raised, that it has, yes, there is that shock where it can hurt, especially if people come and they're like, oh, everyone's going to be like, hi, sister. And you come with this utopian dream. Mm-hmm. But when people ask me, are you American? I have to put all of that aside, because that's not my moment. This is not my moment to make it about me and to say, hey, you need to learn about me, because I'm actually here in your country. And I am here, and I have to be humble in that. And so I do think that we ease into that, but we ease into that by building relationships naturally, by creating, some of these groups and conversations, but also letting it, happen naturally. I've loved getting to know, Eileen over the years through her work and what she does, and through the conversations, that we've then been able to have naturally over the years. But in that being humble, because right now they don't have all that context. If I go spewing all of that and why I see myself as an African in the U.S., I'm doing what men do when they come into a room with white people. So I'm making this moment about me. Mm-hmm. And this moment right now is not about me. And if I'm going to really be African, and I got to be like, yo, I got all this built up, but I got to know right now, yes, I'm from the U.S., right? I don't have to say, I can find my peace within it, whatever that peace is, but I don't need to spew all of this then at this person, overwhelm them, my thoughts, my baggage, my. We can get to that place over time. And I think that's part of it, that patience of getting there and knowing, right now I just got here. This isn't about necessarily getting to know me and throwing all of this, because we got a lot that didn't happen to us there. But let me ease into that as we get to know each other, and it'll happen naturally too.
And one of the things that I don't think we often recognize is how we have incorporated some of that Western colonial in our thinking. It's in us.
So much.
We don't want to admit it, but it's there. And I think it shows up in different ways. And I love what you just said, because that's one way of, nope, you got to recognize me as this. But another way I think it shows up is not recognizing people. By the way, I came up with the term African continentals. I think it sounds sophisticated, and it doesn't, and it's not casual like local. So let me know if you like that. So people who are on the continent have been forced to change their names to appease the Europeans, right? So that the Europeans, they don't want to. Okay, I always tease Kenya people. I'm learning Kenya-Rwanda, and I always tease my teachers about all the syllables, okay, in the language, like Japanese. But the Europeans didn't want to learn all those syllables. So just like in roots, Kunta Kinte became what? Toby, okay? And we don't realize that we do that too. Do we take the time to learn the real names of the people here, or do we insist also on using those European names? That's just kind of one of my little things. So, but I want to ask Justin if you would share that story that we talked about yesterday about the young man who's living with the Rwandese family. It's a great story.
Before I go to that, can I please make a comment on what
Sure.
people have been saying? Whenever I come here, I really come with like a very humble attitude of like learning and trying to understand. Of course, we have this kind of superficial information and the history of like the slavery and how people got in America and Europe. But because it's not a lived experience, we don't understand it at the level at a very good level. And so the other day, my friend Wendy posted something on her WhatsApp status of a little baby. She was, I think, 6 or 7, and she was in a cage. And there was this white baby who was looking, at the black baby. And I was like, what? How long did the baby sit in that tiny cage? And so, and I understand how, it was, dehumanizing and how, physically, impacted the baby and mentally and so sometimes when I love listening, and as you speak, I was really, struggling even to think because it was, it's a lot of things, So I think personally, and I think many Rwandans and continental Africans should listen to this and not listen just to like be sad, but also to, as you said, to understand where you're coming from. I work with Americans, Black Americans, help them, move to Rwanda, and one of the things that I know is really hard, breaking is like most people come thinking, oh, I'm coming to my land, my people, and then they're called Muzungu. So, I
Do you
think
want to define that for people who may not know what that is?
the Muzungu,
Yeah, what is a Muzungu?
it's the white person, and that's actually, the dimension of culture, because culture is very, sophisticated to the level that it actually, affects the way you see things. I have, I do Airbnb at my house, so I host people, different colors. But everyone who comes to my family, to my room, speaking English, regardless of the color of the skin, my children calls them Muzungu. And I'll be like, wait, they're not Muzungu, look. But they'll be like, no, they speak English. And the way they behave is not Rwandan. So they're not Rwandan, they're Muzungu. So most people, like when you come with a different culture, different language, then you're different and you're Muzungu.
Because
Until-
you that to Rwandan diasporas too, or someone who just simply looks too foreign.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's like what we know, like what in Mexico, right? What you say is a gringo, or people see that start as like a white person, but then it becomes
A general
yeah,
thing.
general.
Yeah.
yeah. And one of the things to help people, kind of change the way they think about, African American would be like sharing this, story, the experiences, and the history. Again, your question again, please.
The young man who stayed with the family.
Oh, the young man who stayed with the family. That would be another kind of thing that I would suggest, something that we could do together. But I think we need an entity to be able to do that. I tried it. So I do homestays and cultural immersion programs here in Rwanda. So work with gap year programs, diaspora programs, volunteering programs to come and do 3 months, 2 months experience, live with host families. And all the time I've hosted at least Americans, white Americans. And I think one of the reasons was maybe, I don't know, the people who marketed the program, they just focused on white people. Yes. And and I was lucky one time to have an African American, young boy who did my program. He came and stayed with a Rwandan family for 2 months, for 4 weeks. And at the end of the program, he shared something that it really, broke my heart. I was like, yes, I wish we could do this to like many, young African American. He was like, Justin, now, he was like, I grew up without a father, and almost all my friends don't have, they either don't have fathers, or they have fathers who who didn't provide. So he was like, now I'm happy that I have someone to look up to. I'm confident that a black young man can grow into a providing father. I've seen this happening, like waking up in the morning, see, Papa Ganza going to work and then coming back, working hard, taking care of the family. And I was like, because I didn't know that, I was like, oh, I'm happy you now have a role model. I was like, I'm going back to the US, work hard, and come back to Rwanda. He also mentioned the fact that he walked in the street without, just got unnoticed because everyone thought he was Rwandan. And that gave him a sense of safety and belonging because he was like everyone else.
He said he felt like a human being,
Yeah, he felt like a human being,
not a target.
not a target. So one of the things that I think we could do would be to create a program that brings a lot of young African American to Africa to connect with the continent, learn the culture and regain that sense of being a human because they're valued here.
And what happens to Africans who go to the United States? Do they get integrated into the black communities? No. No, they don't. They go to white churches. They have white people who are their handlers who train them about the culture. So it's time that we begin to claim each other, I think. We need to claim each other in love, in healing, in joy, in our pain. I just think we have to control our destiny, and we cannot allow others to control it.
In certain things, America is in Africa, right? In the way that the American society is set up, it's not set up for that coming togetherness. It doesn't matter who you are, right? And so when people come in, that's why, in New York, you have Little Italy. You have Chinatown. You have Koreatown. You have all of these places. You go to Brooklyn. You're in parts of Brooklyn, you're in the Caribbean. In parts of Brooklyn, you're in part. You feel like you're in a part of Africa. And that's the way that it is in the U.S. You go to the Bronx. It's something else, right? And so the United States in general, to speak to our Africans when they come into America to assimilate into the Black American culture, is because America is a very individualistic nation. It's just what it has. The formation of America, of what we know as America, was based on that. So, it's a completely different society, which is why here, as you were saying, it's more familial. It's seen and more about community. And so sometimes we can get in our own way because we're bringing all of the luggage, the emotional luggage, the psychological luggage. We bring that with us. You bring yourself wherever you go, right? So then we have to work through unloading that in order to come into harmony. First, you got to come in harmony with self before you can come in harmony with anyone else, right? So, and that goes to what Autumn was speaking about. And however, I think that in order to come together with those that were born and reared in Rwanda is to just do what we're doing now, have just a regular conversation. In my house, we just have regular conversations sometimes. Today we were laughing about, my mother, when she comes, she's probably going to see this video and be like, what did you say? But when she comes on Saturday, it was one person said, I was like, when are you going to take off? And he said it. And he said, well, I'm not going to take off because I'm not a little boy. And when I go to my mother's house, I'm a little boy. I said, wait till my mom comes because she's going to be like, Natasha. I said, so I know that experience. And we were laughing because they didn't realize that I share that too, where you have a mother that's like, come here. Like you age backwards when your mama comes around, right? But that's a shared experience, and just having just a regular old conversation about when you're going to take off allowed us to talk about our shared experience with being in your mother's house again. So those are small things. Like, we don't always have to do big grand things. You can do small things on your own time in your own home or wherever you are and just have those types of conversations.
I wanted to add something. I think that what you mentioned is very interesting because it reminded me the work I used to do back then about breaking stereotypes, right? And a lot of times, even when we talk about history as a Rwandan, so me growing up, one of the people that as Rwandans that we used to learn so well way before more than ourselves, right? So some of you have already learned as Rwandans. A lot of times we don't even know our own history, right? So one of my colleagues were like, how many of much of French history that you know compared to Rwandan history? And we were making this joke about the national exams, how we used to have in history 2 sections, section A and section B. And then section A was just basically history around the world, specifically to France, Belgium, Germany. And then there would be section B where you would just have 3 questions. And there's one question about Africa, and then there's one question about Rwanda, and another question about, either Belgium. And she was telling me how, I was like, I always found the especially the questions around African history or Rwandan history to be complicated because I never really knew most of the questions. And then of course it's humor, but we're talking about how we were learned in schools in history to talk about advantages and disadvantages of colonialism when we were growing up. And then you will look for disadvantages and you'll be like, can't seem to find any because there's so many advantages. You're like, they built roads, they built religion, they built schools and all of this because that's how we were taught, right? So unlearning processes came, you grow up and you realize so much of how you fantasize this land, right? Even fantasizing America for me was based on Hollywood, and you get there, the first thing you feel is just disappointment. You're like, how could you have sold me this land in the way, right? Yeah. But in most cases, I think unlearning stereotypes, and I will use Altum as a reference, and I think many times we used to meet in different events, right? And in my own opinion, I think she was just the African American who lives in Rwanda. And I've always told one of her common friends, Winnie, that you remember the lady who has a very weather-like name. I can't put my name on it, you know. And I never really, I think, humanized and put a personality on her until we start talking about feminism, we start talking about Black identity. And I remember having a deep conversation about race analysis on the continent, and even her moving to the stage of inviting me to her own house. I mean, we have had so many coffee chats and we meet now at events. It's impossible that even like, I guess like a month ago we met at the event, I cannot just like randomly pass by her without coming, even if she's like across you know, the other side. I'll be like, hi, you know, because she's familiar to me, right? And it's not even about her being, I don't know, a Black expert whatsoever. And I think unlearning that stereotypes it's many works, and it just doesn't involve between Rwandans versus this community. Even for Rwandans, when you're a diaspora coming back, you know, you have certain cultures, you have a different accent, you know, if you caught speech, and then everybody's like, ooh, Mzungu, you know, like, who are you? And in most cases, even in Rwanda, because we're a very conservative culture and you're not allowed to be, I don't know, very bold and take up spaces. And if there's one thing, to be honest, I've learned about African Americans is also the idea, and it doesn't feel like that way most of the times when you're in America, but we know them to be like, if a Black American is in the room, you know you know that Autumn is there and she's present. And in that context, you know, like, and it's not just about them, like a lot of Rwandans tend to be like, you know, take a step back because it's not something that we have been trained to be in most cases, and especially for women. And it's funny because for me, a lot of the reason why I actually came to become a feminist activism, my literature, my education around it was very, like 90% influenced by the Black history in America, and a lot of literature that I've read, and I saw a lot of similarity in it, and I tried to take that knowledge and, you know, translate it in what could actually be an African feminism in this context. So there's both ways, the things that could be done, but I do strongly believe that idea of even creating that space of finding things that we share as human beings is so essential, because you have no idea things that you could break as a person. And that's basically what a healing journey is about, because it happens without even you noticing it. The next thing you know, you just, you know, you love the person, you connect to the person.
So we really have time for one last question. And if I could ask everybody to answer very quickly. And the question I wanted to ask, acknowledging that yes, personal relationships are important, but we're also talking about joint ventures. What top 3 projects would you like to see Black expats and Rwandese work on? Is that a question I can ask? Go ahead, Justin.
This is something that I really don't want to go back with. Like, speaking of the history and how, you know, it shapes up, you know, perspectives. I want to like mention that the history is being written even now as we speak, and we need to do something about it. Yes, the past has happened and is affecting us, but even today, people are doing stuff. I want to give you one example. I use Canva, writing my books and designing other stuff. But when you type Africa, Rwanda, any country, guess what pictures come up? You never find like Nyarutarama, Kibagabaga, like smart and beautiful girls. All you find is like neighborhoods that no longer exist. And if they're going to take the picture of the city center, they would find an ugly angle and take it. It's really sad, and there's something that I like. We have big, assignment to write our history. And it's not necessarily like writing, it's taking beautiful pictures, post them, share them, and
hashtag them so people can find them when they look up Rwanda. And shout out to the people who have made it their mission. Shout out to Illum, right? That started with wanting to create the pictures that people could Google and see a different Rwanda. Shout out, what is the name of the other one? There's another one that young people started a couple of years ago around pictures.
Image Rwanda?
Yes, I think Image Rwanda and the projects that are working towards it with a long way to go, but the work that is happening to change those images.
And I'm still trying to understand, like, sometimes this little, these are really good initiatives, but they'll be killed by the big fishes, like.
They're hard to find.
And I'm trying to understand how Canva collects pictures, because I think they don't have time to go and take pictures. Sometimes it's the pictures that you upload, and then they just get them.
It's stock. It's from stock, from stock photos.
Yes, and who uploads them? Non-profits. And non-profits, most of the time, they get, of course, they won't take, beautiful pictures of someone good, looking good, because that won't play on people's minds to get money and funds. So, I just wanted to
Don't get me started on the NGOs.
Yes, so we really have to do something. The history happened, but it's also happening now.
Okay.
Top 3
projects.
projects.
You'd like to see Black expats and Rwandese collaborate on. Can I give my 3? That'll start us
Yes.
off? Okay, swimming. I'd like to, because
It's too cold here.
more black people drown than any other place in the world. The numbers are not real high, but still the drowning rates are higher among African countries. So swimming, sustainability, and education would be the 3 areas that I'm interested in.
I like the education part and sort of like the exchange programs that you mentioned. I think there's a need for just, there's already, I think, way too many European volunteers, to be honest. It's just, change the narrative. My roommates met, I think, two months ago, the first African American. It's like, it's so excited. It's like, you're from America, and all of that, those kind of, it shifts something. It's usually small things, but it shifts something. And I think if we're talking about cultural change, it's just basically just people getting exposed to cultures, to people, to different scenarios than they're used with. And I would say that just, I don't know, some sort of like collective actions. I don't know what that looks like, but I like some of the movements that he used to have, like we're gonna collectively build, I don't know, a China lane of this restaurants, and this becomes a safe space for whoever, and we can all collectively move to Kimi. I'm just kidding, but that kind of collective.
You want to reclaim Kimmy? She wants to reclaim Kimmy.
That's what I'm about to say.
Reclaim it for Rwanda.
We can say it together.
I don't have specific projects. I think anything that we can do together would be powerful. What I would like to see more before that is more preparation. I don't know if we're really at that stage. I think that I don't want to say it, but even I think just what you said earlier, so I'm going to reclaim that time on that part a little more. It's like, I think it was really, first, thank you. And it was, dropping the Black expat. We feel like everything is against us. I've been guilty of it. When you feel like it's personal, right? And 4 agreements, don't take anything personal. It is not against you, whatever that thing is. And so then we think they don't know our story. They're treating us like this. How you think necessarily, like all of my many Rwandan returnee friends, they are going through the same thing, right? But we think it's because they don't know our story as Black Americans. And it's anyone else who's coming in, like you said, even Kenya who's next door, or anyone coming from across the continent or other places. So I don't want to see, I'm not gonna say I don't want to see us doing things until we reach that, but I want to see us doing those things first personally before we start talking so much about projects. And I want us to stop looking at all of the ways to just capitalize off of of situations, whether it's capitalizing and making money off of helping people start businesses here, transitioning people to move here. Yes, it is great starting businesses, but everything is not, and it's not just around people wanting to get the money off the US dollars. Us also, Black folks who are also coming here and trying to make a business out of everything and trying to capitalize everything, but then also wanting to criticize capitalism or criticize those same very things, but also replicating them. So until we can look at those things internally, I don't want us to just jump on what should we be doing together, because then we're not doing them in a principled way. And so until we can talk about how to do them in a principled way, I think we're way too premature to just jump into this fantasy or into this capitalist thing of like, oh, we can make money if we do this. Yes, I would love to see us even to get to the point of doing that and not just needing white European dollars and aid to come in, or not, and not just from Black Americans, but the diaspora period. We have enough, or we have some of our own money at this point to be able to fund the things that we want, to be able to go to events here and not have to see banners from former colonizers anymore as the sponsors of all of the events, but to be able to see ourselves pouring money back in. But we first need to talk about how to do it in a principled nature.
Do you want to give your three?
Yes, so I
shall
really
cut
only
that
have
from
two. It kind of piggybacks off of what Autumn was saying as well. One is tapping people into our networks. That's free. So, you know, getting in touch with people. I was on the phone doing that this morning for someone for internships. But it's free for me to just, hey, can you speak to this person? Can that happen? Doesn't take a lot of energy, and it doesn't take money. The other thing is pay people a valuable rate. I get so upset, and Adila knows, because I've had a conversation with people, and they don't want to pay, even if someone works in your home, you don't want to pay them a proper rate. I think it was in the chat today, and I put in, but I didn't put everything in there. And so pay people a proper rate to match the cost of living, because when you're in the U.S., like I work for a U.S. company, you want to have a cost of living increase, right? When you're there. So why would you pay someone less than it just because you can? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And it's going to come back. It's going to come back on you. Life hits us hard. So the seed that you sow will sprout this tree. And if you're sowing a rotted seed, the tree that comes from it will be rotted. So if your intentions aren't right, everything that comes from that act will go wrong. And so pay people what they are, what the value, not just the dollar amount. Because if you say I'm going to just pay someone $50, then you're saying I only value you at $50. When you know, in order for them to have a place to live, they'll probably have to do $20, which means that they won't have water. They won't have a toilet. I get so angry. I'm like, you don't have a toilet? You're going to get a toilet in your home. That's my mission. Everyone that works in my home, they have somewhere that has a toilet in their home. I pay for it. Because as a single mother, I wanted someone to pay for my rent. So it's salary and the place to live. Because my mission is, if I'm going to be in a home with 3 toilets, your house is going to have at least one. And it's going to have a floor, right? Because I have to live out the life that God has given me. So if I don't do that, then I am dishonoring the Creator. I'm dishonoring all my ancestors. I'm dishonoring everyone. So that's what I want to do. And passing on information is free. Yes.
Yeah.
Is to, again, my standpoint is Ikawa Cafe and the team. And talking with them when we first started, and we asked them, well, what do you want to make? What salary do you want to have for us to hire you? And the point of doing that was to see, I don't want to tell you what I think you're worth. I don't know you. But you tell us, what's your worth? What do you think you're worth? And even after they gave us that part, constantly working and trying to pour into them, if you ever was to leave here, you will go out into the world and demand your worth. Not just take what they're going to give you because that's what they think you deserve. But at this point, you know what you deserve. You know your worth. And to maybe you have other expats when they come, not just say, what's the going rate? Because I just want to pay whatever the going rate is. The going rate was designed for them to never come up. This economy will never come up when we only keep demanding $40, $50, $60, knowing good and well I wouldn't take that for a day's pay in the States. But we're so fast to come and give it to them because they don't understand their worth. Changing, and my husband say, stop saying changing, but really for me is being in a position, I don't know if it's a political side or just being able, allowed to voice how if we change the business culture here, Rwanda will begin to develop as fast as the country is. The country's developing because you got expats from all over the world taking advantage of the people, taking advantage of the low cost of everything. But when we can actually start to build together and grow the economy, teaching this is the worth. You charge for what you're worth, not for your product. How much labor did you put into it, not just your product? How much time and thought and energy did you come together and make this, not just that product? You start to see, oh, but if they never heard this, they were never taught, they will never demand it. They will never understand it. You are worth that. So coming together and teaching each other. Now, of course, we want to learn a culture. There's a lot of different things on both sides that we can grow from. But the business culture, I would love to have other expats come and teach. Mama One has an organization where she had a group, a lady come in and teach the women how to sew. And in the beginning, it was, they did their best. But then at this point, they're pretty much masters. They make beautiful garments. The problem is, so does everybody else. They don't have the, how do we market? They don't have that education. How can I put this on e-commerce? We don't have that. How can I make my product stand out so that it's marketable and that we can grow it to the next level instead of the same shops that we've always been doing? Black Americans have that knowledge. We've been forced to have to learn these things. Why not come and share and maybe either a mentorship or even a school or anything on how to grow the economy for the community? That's what I don't know if that was 1, 2, or 3 many things, but that was tied into
That's
that.
your passion.
That's my passion.
Justin.
So 2, 1 is the exchange program. I'm really passionate about it. I'm really doing it. So would want people to join me to do that. Second, I'm really interested in business collaboration and information sharing and partnerships. So I think I would be interested in Rwanda, African American Business Chamber, like where we come together, we share information, we share experiences, we share connections and collaboration. I think that would be great for me. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I forgot something. I just remembered last time something I said, because I work in a startup world. I mean, now there's a booming and growing, startup investment in Rwanda and all of it. And I think we really need, Black experts and investors, because I think we understand each other, and especially focusing on women entrepreneurs. And I think it's exhausting to work under the same structures of people who do not really understand the cause, the struggle, the things on the ground. It can be very, very tiring. So, and I think that movement would actually be perfect for the ecosystem right now.
To like invest and stuff.
Yeah, investment.
Yeah. And I think I would love to see a Rwanda one. There is one, well, there's the US one, right? That's more US. I don't think it's as international for like women who have ideas and everyone can it's almost like a GoFundMe. No, I forget the name of it. It's a women's something and everyone does it. And I know I've heard while back in Clubhouse that there was an African version of that was starting, but I think it was West African based. But it would be great, like where people can just put up their ideas, and if you had proof of concept and can actually trace what's happening with it, and people can tie it into actually supporting, right, various startups or co-ops or different things that are happening. But a lot of times people just don't know where, right, and what that thing is if they're not living here on the ground.
I think one of the things that we come with that I tend to disagree with is telling people what we think they ought to do. Okay? My position is not telling them this is what you want to do, but asking, what is it that you want to do that I can help you to do? Okay? Because we don't know everything. Part of our problem is that we come from America thinking that everybody here doesn't have good sense, okay? And we are coming to teach them something. And that is not the case. So we need to look at that, okay? And we also need to include in that our youth, because we're totally forgetting about the youth, all right? And they are our future.
So I want to thank you all for your contributions tonight. And I just want to share what I've learned from listening to you all. What I've learned is the importance of us getting organized. I've also learned the importance of us not just jumping into things, but as Autumn was saying, we need to move with principles and be very measured in how we move forward together. We need to get to know each other. We need to heal together, HEAL, heal together. And we can dream together. And I think that's what we started doing tonight, was to begin to do our dreaming. And no goal gets achieved unless it starts with a dream. So again, I want to thank you all, but thank you all for coming. And again, would you give our panel a round of applause? Thank you. Thank you guys so much.